to see you guys. We are back.
Good to see you, boys.
Good to see everybody. What is this now? Episode 8?
Yeah, I believe 8.
Nice. Well, we got a good one for everyone here today. We're going to talk a little bit about some specifics getting into the Battle of Gettysburg, and it's going to get really nitty and gritty, but that's what we're all about here. We got some really positive things to say for once about old Dick Anderson, and we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite, AP Hill, and it's going to be really nice. Ben Cwayna has a presentation for us today. As always, we got Ben Flowerday and Ben Cwayna here with us. You guys know the drill by this point. I think we'll just get right into this one. How you doing, Ben? You ready for this?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Dylan. Yeah, so it's a great day. AP Hill, Dick Anderson redemption.
Yeah.
Okay. Originally, I don't know why, but I get these little weird Civil War, obsessions. I was reading Copyton the other night, and I was reading some stuff from Sears, and I listened to a tour on YouTube, and all I'm getting is AP Hill at Gettysburg was a shadowy figure. Dick Anderson didn't do his job on the second day. AP Hill was nowhere to be found. The Third Corps just sucked. And, that, again, I'm over exaggerating, but it really.
No, that is kind of the general concession, I feel like, when we get into it. People who have just a basic, it's surface level knowledge, just look at it as they don't even know where Hill was most of the battle.
Right. And so that's kind of the mainstream or the accepted version out there that AP Hill was a non-factor in the battle, that he wasn't doing his job, that Anderson's division basically was too narrow of a front deployed. And so I originally wanted to do a different topic today. I wanted to do McLaws's court-martial, but I said, nope, we gotta do this. And we haven't done we did a Gettysburg episode a few episodes back. I know that we want to not always do stuff with Gettysburg, but I could not let this be. I had to deal with it today. I'm sorry. I'm taking license and privilege. I'm a third owner of the podcast, and that's what we're going to do. So
I'm with you. I'm ready for it. Let's go.
All right. So let me pull it up. I'm going to be a little bit spirited. Let me go to share screen.
Real quick, what you guys wearing? What you drinking?
Oh, I am wearing my brown sweater. I just came from work because I actually have a job, and I'm drinking cider, which is back here.
I'm still totally unemployed and just sit around and kit all day, every day. So today I'm wearing my commutation style frock coat with the earlier war kepi that I'm going to be wearing this weekend to an event that we're portraying the late 1862 27th Virginia Infantry, which is part of the Stonewall Brigade.
Winter quarters?
It's a preparation for our winter quarters event. We're going to get out to where we're doing picket duty, and we're going to be digging some earthworks and all that fun stuff, and just getting real dirty and getting everything to look the part for the event coming up next month. And then I'm just drinking some coffee out of my old tin cup.
And I'm wearing a Richmond Depot kepi. It's one of my original Civil War reenacting purchases. I don't have a red battle shirt, but I did feel in the spirit of the presentation today to wear a red shirt. I do have a job. I just have a weird schedule.
He said, "I do have a job."
Yeah, no, it was not meant to be derogatory. I just,
my dad
almost had a job.
My dad a couple of weeks ago called me. He's like, "What do you mean Cwayna's the only one gainfully employed?" And I'm like, "Well, hang on."
That wasn't meant. Well, you said that once, I think.
That was me. Yeah, that was me that said that. But I just have a weird schedule, and anyway, I'm drinking coffee as well, but I laced it with a little bit of Bailey's and rum. So
there you go.
Dylan, have you read this book?
No.
Okay, it's a history of the Stonewall Brigade by one of my favorite historians, Bud Robertson, from Virginia Tech. This was his thesis statement when he was a grad student.
Nice.
It's a very nice history of the Stonewall Brigade. Lots of good stuff on the 27th. I'll see what I can fish out for you for your event.
Who's it by?
James Robertson. but
Names are
we all call him Bud.
good.
Yep. He was a faculty member at Virginia Tech for a long time, a major Civil War figure in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. He was on all the episodes of Civil War Journal, that kind of stuff.
Right on.
He also wrote the definitive biography on Stonewall Jackson.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Yep.
I've been reading mostly for the winter quarters event. We basically went off of Jackson, one of Jackson's foot cavalry, Worsham.
Horsham, yeah, that's a classic.
Yeah, I love that one.
Okay, well, let's get rolling. I am, like I said, I threw this together in about 2.5 hours over some scotch. It's quickly done. I hope it's good, but we got to get this cleared up for our listeners. It's a defense of Lieutenant General A.P. Hill and Major General Richard H. Anderson on July 2nd, not the 1st, not the 3rd, July 2nd, 1863. So this is very narrow. We're going to get into the weeds. If you like Civil War tactics, this is going to be all about you. So we have on the right, we have A.P. Hill, a very nice painting. And on the left, we have Dillon's personal idol, besides Joe Johnston, Richard H. Anderson. And I need to ask Dillon a question. What is his middle name?
Not Old Dick.
Not Old Dick. You know what
Harry.
It is?
Harry?
What?
Is it Harry?
Close. No, it's Heron. Herron. All right. Here we go.
Harry Heron.
Okay. So, as I indicated, the historiography of A.P. Hill and Dick Anderson is not positive at Gettysburg. And July 2nd is really where I think most historians talk about this. Here are some quotes. I'm not going to read them per se for you, but these are some good quotes that I've picked up and where I found them from various historians, various opinions about Hill. You know, he turned in a less than stellar performance and was criticized for so many, for some of his decisions on the first 2 days. Hill's absence from his corps area, magnified by his failure to supervise his division's attacks, serve as a serious indictment of his skills. First person account from A.R. Wright to his wife right after the battle. We were sacrificed to the bad management, cowardly conduct of others. That's a first person account. Here's another one from Wilcox, who wrote to E. Porter Alexander. I'm certain that General A, meaning General Anderson, never saw a foot of ground on which his 3 brigades fought. I always believed that Anderson was too indifferent to his duties at Gettysburg. Here's some. What was that?
Was that letter? Was that a quote from Wright to his wife? Is that the same letter that gets penned in the Savannah Republican?
I believe so.
I hate that.
I'm not going into the Wright controversy because that's a program all in and of itself. Okay. But
goes right on any day of the week.
Here is some more. Okay. And these are from what I would call more modern day, really prestigious historians about the battle. Eric Campbell is a great historian at Gettysburg. He says right here that Third Corps commander and Anderson's superior failed in several key areas. It was Hill who either ordered or at least approved Anderson's overextended line. We're going to get to that today. Once the fighting began, he never made an effort to coordinate his efforts with Longstreet's. That's absolute BS. Hill was also responsible for Anderson's movements, yet he apparently did nothing when Anderson's attack broke down, nor bothered to find out why Pender's division remained idle along Seminary Ridge. It seems likely that Hill was guilty of being out of touch with his division commanders. Okay, that's from a really good article that Eric Campbell wrote for the National Park Service, okay?
Now, Pender's division along Seminary Ridge, weren't they idle because they were kind of taking pretty consistent fire from Cemetery Hill? Like there wasn't, if they moved or left or anything, it wasn't, they were essentially the center of the Confederate line at that point.
Yep, we're gonna see exactly why it didn't happen here in a minute. But you're right. Their orders were to kind of stay put until something happened. They were the holding division. Okay. Stephen Sears, who I think is one of the greatest historians of the Eastern Theater. This is important. They, Hood and McLaws, each striking powerfully on a 2-brigade front, each backed by 2 brigades. After 2 hours or so of fighting, this change, of course, surely became evident to Anderson and his superior A.P. Hill, yet neither made any change in Anderson's dispositions, nor did General Lee intervene. In due course, Anderson advanced on a wide front as originally planned, an attack that was all width and no depth. Anderson then compounded the misstep by putting only 3 of his 5 brigades fully into the fight. So this is what we're going to address today. The width of Anderson's line, why it was so wide, and why did he only deploy 3 brigades? Okay. And finally, he says, if Dick Anderson did little that afternoon, Powell Hill did less. Hill on July 2nd remains a shadowy figure, just as he was on July 1st. Here's Coddington. Repeatedly, he, meaning Wilcox, called for supports, but there were none to be had. For Anderson, in contrast to Longstreet, had his brigades attack in one long, thin line. Hill, who was as his immediate superior, must share responsibility for the mistake. Again, that's Ed Coddington, one of the great historians of the battle. So why the fuss? All right. So without diving too deep into the first day, what we can say is that the second day centered on a controversy between these 3 gentlemen here. A.R. Wright, Ambrose R. Wright, on the right here. That's why I put him on the right. No pun intended. We have Carnet Posey in the center, who commanded a Mississippi brigade, and William Mahone on the left, who commanded a Virginia brigade. I should say that Wright commanded a Georgia brigade. So all 3 of these brigades are in the 5-brigade division of Dick Anderson, who is one of 3 division commanders under A.P. Hill. All right, so we got Hill, Anderson, and these 5 brigadiers, 3 of them, their photographs are here. And basically, A.R. Wright, Ambrose Wright, who's on the right here, is going to complain to Posey, or complain that Posey and Mahone never came to his assistance during his assault on Cemetery Ridge in the evening of July 2nd. Okay, and that's going to create, again, we're not going to go into that controversy because that is a huge controversy that I think Dylan, that'd be a really good program for Dylan to do someday, because it directly affects his Florida boys and Wilcox's Alabama's troops, who are the 2 brigades that fought as well from that division. But this is the genesis of this feud, and it starts right after the battle. What was that?
That's a damn liar.
So when we look at A.P. Hill's role in the battle and assessing his role and Dick Anderson's role on July 2nd, we have to figure out and determine what was the plan. Okay? So this is a map of Gettysburg, July 2nd. We've got Ewell on the extreme Confederate left. We've got A.P. Hill in the center. And the plan is for Longstreet to move to the south and deploy both of his divisions in the manner here, wheel to the left, and drive up Emmitsburg Road and catch partially envelop the Federal left flank, cave it in, and drive it towards Gettysburg. That's what Lee wants to do. And in the morning of July 2nd, this is what he thinks the Federal line looks like. And he's not far from being wrong. The Federal line ends right down around just south of where the current Pennsylvania Monument is. That's where Sickles's corps was posted. Okay. So it's probably a little longer than this map here, but it's going to taper off right down south, just to the north of Little Round Top. Okay.
Couldn't Lee see the was it only the Kadori farm that he could see the Union line extending to, or did he think it went all the way to the Trossel farm?
So again, I don't want to get too in the weeds, but Captain Samuel Johnston's reconnaissance, he got to Little Round Top, and people debate whether he did or whether he didn't. He damn well got to Little Round Top. I know he did. I was there. No, just kidding. He got to Round Top, and he said there were no troops on Round Top or anywhere there in a position to oppose us, which basically meant that Sickles's line, which ended just south of the Pennsylvania Monument in that low, marshy ground to the north of Little Round Top, they were encamped there. Okay. And so Lee could not see that, obviously, from his position. And so he could only see that crest of Cemetery Ridge as it faded back towards the Taneytown Road. But Johnston tells him the federal left is in the air. It's down just north of the Round Tops, and there are no troops there that are opposing us because they're in camp. Okay. So here's so don't take my word for it. Here's Robert E. Lee's report. Quote, it was determined to make the principal attack upon the enemy's left and endeavor to gain a position from which it was thought that our artillery could be brought to bear with effect. Longstreet was directed to place the divisions of Hood and McLaws and Hood on the right of Hill, partially enveloping the enemy's left, which he was to drive in. Okay, now, what does he say about Hill? General Hill was ordered to threaten, words matter, guys, threaten the enemy's center to prevent reinforcements being drawn to either wing and cooperate with his right division in Longstreet's attack. Okay? That's from Lee's report from January of 64. So Hill's got 3 divisions. His right division is Anderson. Anderson's going to cooperate with Longstreet's attack. His center division or his other division on the line is Pender. Pender is supposed to threaten the enemy's center, hold the position, and then move forward if things start to go south for the Union. And then Heath, which is not on this map, Heath's division is in reserve. They were so torn up from the day before. They're back behind the McMillan Woods. They're back in those woods behind McMillan Farm. They're resting. Okay. Questions about this, gentlemen, before we move on?
Well, my only thing is if he's supposed to prevent reinforcements from being drawn to either wing and threaten the center, how is he supposed to do that while cooperating with Longstreet's attack that isn't happening yet?
He's only supposed to send one division, and that's Anderson's, is going to cooperate. And Pender is kind of the other division that's in play here.
Okay.
So Pender's got to kind of Pender's got to be loose. If they need to charge, he will charge if things break down. But Pender's got to stay there because the center of the line can't break, right? Right. Did that answer your question?
So basically, he's just splitting up his core. Anderson is going to cooperate with Longstreet's assault, and Pender is basically going to hold the line. If there's a success, he's going to, exploit that. If there's a full-on retreat, then he's going to be there to hold the line. But the big thing for me is preventing reinforcements from being drawn to either wing. That's the part that he really fails on, and if you look at it, because if he's the one that's supposed to stop any reinforcements from being drawn down, how is he supposed to do that and hold the line at the same time, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, Lee's plan was having Pender there would prevent it in and of itself. If you move Pender, there's no threat that they can charge through. So Pender's going to fire artillery. He's going to make some demonstrations. He's going to move troops around to act like he's going to assault. But Pender's mere presence there is going to keep the Federals in place.
Okay. That makes sense.
Now, this map is not what actually happened. This map is what they wanted to happen. That's why this map is interesting. This shows what Lee wanted to happen. He wanted McLaws and Hood to come down, wheel to the left, and move up that Emmitsburg Road access, partially enveloping the Federal line and driving it in. Okay? So that's the plan. Now, Hill's cooperative role. Let's read again from the reports. The corps of General Longstreet, this is coming from AP Hill. The corps of General Longstreet, and he basically means McLaws and Hood, was on my right, and in a line very nearly at right angles to mine. Okay, let's go back and look at this. See how that is? That's going to be a right angle here as soon as Hood and McLaws make their wheel.
Right.
Okay. All right. Let's go back. Right angles to mine. General Longstreet was to attack the left flank of the enemy and to sweep. This is important, guys. Again, words matter. Sweep down his line, and I was directed to cooperate with him with. This is again important. That's why I underlined it. Listen to it. Read it. Love it. Learn it. With such of my brigades from the right as could join in with his troops in the attack. With such of my brigades from the right as I could join in with his troops in the attack. Doesn't say Dick Anderson has to deploy all of his brigades. It says he has to deploy those that can cooperate with Longstreet and assist Longstreet with Longstreet's attack, because Longstreet's is the primary attack. Okay, so right now AP Hill and Lee's reports are they jive with each other. Okay, here's Anderson's report. I received notice that Lieutenant General Longstreet would occupy the ground on the right. Okay, we're consistent so far with Lee and Hill. That his line would be in direction nearly at right angles with mine. Let's go back again for our listeners. Going to be at right angles. Okay. That he would assault the extreme left of the enemy and drive him toward Gettysburg. And I was at the same time ordered to put the troops of my division into action by brigades. By brigades. That means an echelon. As soon as those of General Longstreet's corps had progressed so far in their assault as to be connected with my right flank. It's not until 5:30 o'clock in the evening that McLaw's division, by which the movement of my division was to be regulated, had advanced so far as to call for the movements of my troops. That's from Dick Anderson's report. So what's Anderson saying? He's saying, okay, let's go back. Longstreet's going to wheel to the left. They're going to form at right angles. You see my cursor here? And I'm going to put each one of my brigades into action and tack on to Longstreet, to McLaws's left flank as we drive this federal line up towards Gettysburg and collapse it. And so each one of Anderson's 5 brigades is going to tack on and then carry the assault forward as Hood is getting into the rear of the Federal Army. Okay, it's a brilliant plan. It really is. And this is what it would have. And this is kind of what it would have looked like. Okay, this is the map of what happened. But you get the point here. The McLaws is wheeling to the left. Wilcox then goes in. Then Lang. Then Wright. And that's why, guys, Anderson's division was strung out in single line brigades, not the double ranks that Longstreet and Hood did, because Longstreet and Hood, and if you don't get anything out of this program today, Longstreet and Hood's main assault was a different type of assault than what Anderson's was. Anderson was a supplement to Longstreet. Longstreet was the main sweeping, we're taking everybody in, we're going to crash the flank like Chancellorsville, and then Anderson is going to be the cherry on top. I'm going to just pop in each one of my units to the left of him and pop them in as each successive Union line falls back. Okay.
Anderson wasn't supposed to be a main assault front. It's supposed to be a supporting wave of brigades that are coming in on the right. And
provided that Longstreet's attack is successful.
Right. This is all just on paper so far.
It's all on paper. We haven't even got to what really happened. Okay. But this is where you got to understand the mindset of these generals. Okay. So now here's Longstreet's report. He, the enemy, was driven from point to point. However, until nearly night, when a strong force met the brigades of General Anderson's division, which were again cooperating upon my left to be somewhat exposed and outflanked. I don't think there's any doubt that we can say without a doubt that A.P. Hill's right division, that of Dick Anderson, was a cooperating force. It was not the main attack.
Exactly.
He's there to help Longstreet.
Right.
And Longstreet has two divisions that he's arrayed with brigades behind each other for depth.
Exactly.
And they're going to crash through there and crack it, just like Chancellorsville. Okay? All right. So that's the plan. But what actually happens? Okay? This is, and this map shows again, you know, we've talked about this around the campfire. I think Dan Sickles, you can like him, love him, you can say disobeyed orders, you can call him whatever you want, but you cannot deny that him moving out to the peach orchard threw a monkey wrench into everything that happened that day on July 2nd. So that's what he did. Sickles, you see the dotted line down there where Sickles was. That's where his line was, Dylan. So you know where that line was. Okay. He takes his entire Third Corps and he moves them out to beyond the Trossel Farm into the Peach Orchard salient. And he creates a salient there. His right flank runs along the Emmitsburg Road. His left flank is distributed south of the Peach Orchard. It bends back to the Rosewoods, down through the wheat field, and the line ends right at Devil's Den. Okay? Winfield Scott Hancock said when he did that, he stuck out like a sore thumb. So Sickles' movement to the Peach Orchard altered Longstreet's deployment. How? Okay. What happens here? Instead of Longstreet's line being at a nearly right angle to Anderson and Hill, it's now damn near parallel or an extension of Hill's line. You see that? Look at this map, and then I'm going to go back and look at what was going to happen here.
Right.
Okay.
You have the beginning forming of the right angle. It's just as soon as they sweep and what they think is going to be the left flank is not there, they run head first into Sickles' whole corps. Now
Boom.
You have lines that are just completely parallel to each other. Damn near, like you said, just an extension of Hill's line.
Right. So Longstreet gets out there. And again, there's a lot more to this, but we're going to go with the Reader's Digest version here. But the bottom line is Longstreet can't believe that there's a corps of federal infantry in his front. He can't make his wheel. He can't conform to the Emmitsburg Road. He's got to figure out what to do now. Okay. And so what he does is he extends Hood down to the south of McLaws. Instead of moving them in, together behind each other up the federal flank, he moves Hood south of McLaws. And instead of them all moving forward at once, Longstreet decides, I think wrongfully, and a terrible tactical mistake, he decides to send his brigades in by echelon as well.
What's terrible about that is that the whole point of sending brigades in echelon is to support a main assault wave that is already through. That's the whole point.
Absolutely right. Longstreet's deployment in echelon is not a main attack; it's a supporting role attack. Exactly. And so think about this.
Your assault hinges on your your attack. You're not in a supporting role. You're not
right. So what happens is this, guys. You look at the map here and read my last bullet point. Each of Longstreet's 8 brigades went forward and fought independent federal units or were drawn away from the Emmitsburg Road axis. All of Longstreet's units are going due east rather than due northeast, except for maybe 1 or 2 brigades, which we'll talk about here in a moment. So Sickles' movement to the Peach Orchard forces Longstreet to redeploy, but I still think Longstreet's got a chance here. All he's got to do is go a little farther to the south and then, again, partially envelop the federal left, cave it in, but the problem is Longstreet's 2 divisions, 8 brigades, whatever you want to call it, they went in independently. And they had to fight on an independent basis There was no sweeping movement up the line. It was each brigade fighting for itself. And I've said this to Ben a number of times. You take a block of ice and drop it on the ground, on the cement, and it's going to fracture, okay? The block of ice was Longstreet's corps, but the way he sent those men into that attack, they all went in different directions. And there was no unified command.
You have each brigade going in by themselves, but then even on top of that, you have brigades that are splitting apart. You have, Law's brigade that is, breaking apart to go attack guns, and then you have Benning going in and following the wrong attack, and
Yep.
it's all messed up all over the place. And that's what happens when you deploy each brigade in succession like that. And not in an overall attack front.
So take my word for this, guys, but I'm going to go back to this map here, what was supposed to happen. Just take my word for it. McLaws and Hood were supposed to basically wheel to the left, and there are even some accounts that says that McLaws was supposed to go in first with Hood behind him. So either way, you've got some depth to that attack. You want depth to that attack, okay? And that's how Longstreet was originally going to deploy. With Anderson's division, you don't need depth because you're assuming that Longstreet has partially enveloped the Federal left. He's caved it in, and you're following a retreating enemy. So each one of Anderson's 5 brigades is just going to tack on and carry the assault up with Longstreet. So,
They just run into an entire corps.
Correct. So that's what happens here. So let me move to the next slide here. So what actually happened? Anderson's division deploys in one long line of single brigades, and each brigade in echelon is supposed to tack onto the left flank of McLaws or Hood as it, and I'm using Lee's terms or Hill's term, sweeps down the Federal line. Well, as we know, there was no sweeping down the Federal line. The problem was Longstreet's attack, for a variety of reasons, goes astray. Only one brigade, Barksdale, which is shown here on this map, actually wheels to the northeast. And as a result, the Federal line, which receives a lot of reinforcements, never gets driven in or begins to fall apart. Now, there are some retreats. Don't get me wrong. Wheatfield, Devil's Den, Peach Orchard, okay, they do fall back, but there's enough Federal reinforcements coming in that the Federal line never truly cracks under Longstreet's assault because he puts each one of his units in piecemeal, okay? As I say here, Longstreet's attack is diluted. It loses its punch because he sends them all in different directions, okay? With no more than Barksdale's brigade inching forward and failing to achieve panic in the Union line, each successive brigade of Anderson faced more and more Union reinforcements. And instead of assisting and cooperating in a successful attack, they are faced with attacking a reinforced line on Cemetery Ridge. As a result, Anderson and Hill don't fully deploy their division. Mahone and Posey remain in their positions. The decision has been criticized, but in light of the failure of Longstreet's attack, probably saved hundreds of lives. So, again, go back to the orders. What are the orders? Anderson is supposed to only put in the units that he can help cooperate with Longstreet's attack, okay? And I pose the question here. How could Anderson and Hill cooperate with Longstreet's corps when his troops were falling back from the Cadore Thicket and the Peach Orchard and the Wheatfield? They never made it. They never made it up to Anderson's line. Well, a few of them did. Well, Barksdale did. But Barksdale was the only one of Longstreet's units that actually made it up whereby we could kick in Anderson's guys. And then Barksdale had to fall back, as we know. So there's no more Longstreet attack to support.
Right.
Okay.
So when you're looking at Anderson going in, there's not supposed to be, like they talk about, him having a long, thin line.
Right.
There's not supposed to be another line behind that. It's
because
all on this attack to the right, wheeling up northeast, and then joining that in echelon from there. never, like you said, only Barksdale actually makes it up to the position where they can send in Anderson's division.
Yep.
But when they're falling back, what are you supposed to attach troops to
Correct.
develop this breakthrough that's never occurred?
You got it. And so Anderson, though, to his credit, Anderson and Hill, to their credit, they see Barksdale, and so they do. They send in Wilcox. They send in Carey.
But
what was that?
Anderson did exactly what he was ordered to do. Hill did exactly what he was ordered to do by deploying only Anderson.
Right.
When you look at the rest of this attack, they have the oversight to look at it and be like, okay, this is falling apart. How are we supposed to commit any more troops to an attack that has already fallen apart?
And I've got a theory on that, and I'll get to that in a moment. So here's the map here on the right. We see basically McLaws and Barksdale's Mississippians down at the very bottom. They're trying like hell to wheel and make that wheel, okay? And they actually do make the wheel a little bit. That's when Anderson starts Wilcox off. Then he starts laying off, and then he starts Wright, okay? So they're trying to help here, but there's also no reinforcements from Longstreet's troops coming in because they're all fighting down on the south end of the battlefield. They're screwing around on Little Round Top and the Devil's Den and the Wheatfield. They're not even up. All those units, guys, and I'm sorry I get excited.
Well, there's
all those units are supposed to be up here with Anderson. Okay?
There's no general direction on the field. There's nobody guiding these troops to where they should be attacking. They're only attacking the troops to their front. They're doing what soldiers are supposed to do, and they're fighting. They're pushing back. They're actually
because Longstreet never partially enveloped the Federal left flank.
Exactly. And
it turned
you have to look at Hood getting injured too. There's no Hood. There's no Longstreet present there guiding troops to the northeast and north.
Go ahead, Benny.
Forward.
Well, it was drawn up on the map as a flanking attack, and it turned into a frontal assault. And
yes,
yep.
When that happens, sometimes the flanking attack was supposed to move northward, but the way the geography was, it put the front southward. So you have, the far right of Longstreet's line moving southeast instead of north, like due north up along the Emmetsburg Road.
Right.
And yeah.
So your timeline is this, okay? To bottom line it here for Anderson's division: Wilcox, Perry, or Lang, however you want to call it, and Wright's brigade do advance. They follow the order, okay? Wilcox, on the right of Anderson, he requests support. Anderson dispatches a courier to Mahone, who refuses to go to the right to reinforce Wilcox. Now, I don't know why Mahone did that. He says that he had orders from Anderson to stay put, but it was a courier from Anderson, so I don't know how you justify that. That's not the purpose of this presentation. But Mahone stays put. Wright's Georgians, they approach Cemetery Ridge, and they actually get up there and they break the Federal line briefly. But again, there's nobody to their right that has had success. So it's like a frontal assault. It's like Benson. It's like Pickett's charge on day 2. Okay. So, but he's ordered by Anderson to do what you can, press on. Maybe you'll run into Longstreet's troops back there. Who knows? Do the best you can. And there's also some instances in which Carnot Posey's Mississippi Brigade was supposed to deploy to the north of Wright, but he thought he was only supposed to advance 2 of his Mississippi regiments as skirmishers. Okay, so there was some breakdown there. Now, the one area where I will criticize Anderson, in my opinion, is it appears, and this comes from A.R. Wright, so you can take it with whatever grain of salt you want, but one of Wright's staff officers goes back and he finds Dick Anderson and his entire staff resting in the woods, I think down near the Spangler farm in a gully during the action. Now, not here to debate whether it happened or not. I'm just telling you that's what one of Wright's staff officers did or said. Okay. The bottom line, okay, this will be on the test. Anderson deployed 3/5 of his division. He saw little success on the right with Longstreet's attack. Indeed, only Barksdale, right? He did order Mahone to the right, who disobeyed, but he only had so much to offer. He's only got 5 brigades. 3 of them are in. With night approaching, Mahone dissident, Posey tied up at the Bliss farm, and more importantly, no success to cooperate with, Anderson passively let the attack die on the vine. I think Anderson looked at it and said, we're not. I think him and Hill looked at it and said, okay, obviously Longstreet's attack has not progressed where we have any hope of cooperating with them. So we're going to let this die on the vine. We're going to get our troops back, and that's going to be it. And for anybody who says that A.P. Hill was not on the field or absent or anything like that, I've got a first-person attack here from a first-person account from a 3rd Corps artilleryman, William Chamberlain, who said that General Hill and his staff were occupied in rallying some of the Confederates who were falling back in groups of 2 or 3 down near McLaus's division. So Hill was very much on the field. I can't speak for Anderson, but the bottom line is, I think Anderson and Hill both looked at this and said, look, we gave it our best shot. We deployed half of our division. We're only supposed to put in the number of the brigades that can help with Longstreet, but Longstreet's not here. He's not here. He's way back there to the south. Why should we butt our heads up against his fortified position when they're not running? Okay. So I asked the question, what more could Hill or Anderson do in that situation? And there's a painting here of what they think the Bliss farm may have looked like back in 1863. A great painting by Dale Gallen. All right. So here comes our boy Pender. Okay. Pender's orders were unrelated to Anderson's. Arguments that Mahone and Posey's failure to launch prevented Pender's division to move forward are unpersuasive. Pender's orders were unrelated to Anderson's. While Anderson's orders were contingent on Longstreet's success, Pender's division was to move forward if a good opportunity for doing so presented itself. So once Anderson and Longstreet break the Federal line up towards Cemetery Hill, that's when Pender is supposed to spring into action and exploit the breakthrough. Okay.
Right, like we said earlier in the beginning, they're still holding the line.
Yes.
Reinforcements from being deployed to either wing, and they're ready to exploit a breakthrough should one present itself. But how are you going to just abandon the line when there's no success in any vicinity in your view?
Correct. 100%.
Now, one of the things I'm wondering about, would it have been possible, like, for Hill to have been super proactive and been like, Longstreet's not here. Can I shift maybe instead of is there anybody else like Posey or Mahone that could have deployed farther to the right and just investigated, did some recon to find out what the fuck was going on with Longstreet's attack? Maybe direct some people north, get some word like, hey, you guys are fighting the wrong fucking way. Sorry, I know I just cussed right there, but I'm excited. Maybe we can have our editor bleep that out for us.
I don't mind if it stays in, but it's a great question, Dylan. But again, I think you're dealing kind of this all happened in like an hour. So like, I don't know. I think when you're dealing with horseback couriers, and it's not like you can just press a button and move a bunch of
at this point. How much more can you do without causing any more inflicting damage or confusing the situation further?
Right. And so, is that theoretically a good idea? Absolutely. But in the real world, I just don't think it works. So as I indicated, this controversy with Hill and Anderson kind of spiraled out of control immediately after the battle. And I don't have all the details on. Apparently, Ambrose Wright wrote an article into the Savannah Republican down in Georgia. He wrote a letter to his wife that ended up being somewhat conveyed in a newspaper. It was critical of Anderson. It was critical of Mahone. It was critical of Posey. And so look at the
Right.
date here. I found this article in the Richmond Enquirer from August 7th, 1863, page 2. This is a portion of that article that I cut and copied here for y'all. But basically, it says exactly what I put forward in this this presentation, that he's basically saying our division was to cooperate with Longstreet, move in echelon from right to left, so as the better and the more safety to support and accelerate. Here's the point. Look at this. Accelerate the successes of the attacking corps, the attacking corps. It was Longstreet was the attacking corps. We were a sideshow.
Yep.
We're only supposed to move forward if there's success. And so he says Anderson did advance such parts of his division as were called for in the developments of the action and plan. Okay? And so you can read this for yourself. I'm not going to read it for you, but basically William Mahone and Garnet Posey are saying bullshit. Anderson did everything we could do to help Longstreet's attack, and we can't help that it didn't succeed, but that's not our fault.
Right here, our successes on the right had not yet arrived at that stage, which invited any advance from this part of the line, and hence it was likewise that no part of General Pender's division was put forward in this action.
There you go.
He was hindered or delayed by the movement of any part of General Anderson's division.
There you go. There you go. You know, A.P. Hill is not an idiot. Dick Anderson is not an idiot. They want to win this battle, but they're not going to put guys into a meat grinder when Longstreet hasn't moved his men up where they should be. And again, this isn't an anti-Longstreet presentation, although you guys all know my thoughts on him, but you cannot blame Hill and Anderson for not moving their men up when who are they going to be cooperating with?
Right. And even if they decide, like, if they decide to go against orders, instead of worrying about, like, okay, Longstreet is gone and we have to just worry about doing something ourselves, and they send an attack forward, how are they going to sweep to the northeast and north when they have, you know, an entire front at that point? It just becomes another frontal assault that's totally going to fail with no support from Longstreet.
Wilcox hit a brick wall. Perry hit a brick wall. Wright hit a brick wall. At some point, Anderson and Hill are going, okay, we get it. We're not making any progress, so why send in Mahone and Posey?
Yeah. And then just imagine, like, they're still thinking about, you know, the next days ahead of them, possible chances of making another attack. How are you supposed to conduct another attack when you blew your entire force on this attack you knew was going to fail right from the beginning? And then they, you know,
so Ben,
but
we've
different story.
I know you and I have talked about this at least a little bit, but I'm wondering if some of the controversy here is there. Well, two things at play, but one, we always talk about how kind of the culture of Lee's army was to attack, and to avoid attacking is what drew controversy more so than attacking. And, you know, you see it all the time with something like that. And the fact of the matter is, this wasn't an attack that was made. Whether that was the best decision or not, culturally within the Army of Northern Virginia, it's attack, move quickly. But then we also talked about how in, you know, spring of '63, Lee put out a note to his subordinates basically saying, stop inflating casualty reports, like inflicting, you know, the mark of a good unit isn't sustaining the most casualties of the battle, it's achieving the objective. And I think that's something that Anderson and Hill potentially really took to heart here, is that this is not the time to go to glory. Like, there's no glory in losing more men than we need to in this situation, because it's not, you know, the conditions haven't been met for success here.
Right. And the where I think you're right there is because Lee never chastised Anderson or Hill because of it.
Right. I was about to bring that up as well, is that none of this criticism is coming from Lee.
Right.
There's no
or even Longstreet. There may have been some stuff there in the post-war years, but at the time, there was no controversy about this as far as from the upper command.
There was never any Lee saying, well, if only Hill had moved or Anderson.
Right.
There was nothing.
Right.
I think even high command realized that this, what their orders were, was conditional versus objective.
Versus peremptory.
Right. Exactly. So there's no, the conditions were not met, therefore the order. I mean, it's like if I say, hey, Ben, let's go meet for dinner at 6 and then go out to a bar. I go there at 6, you don't show up. I'm not gonna continue the night after that. Like, you didn't meet the condition there to.
Right. So, and like I said, the failure on the right or lack of complete success, I'll put it in other words, prevented a full deployment of Anderson's division. And that's the bottom line.
It's a pretty good way of summing it up right there. It's exactly how you can put it in very simple terms right there.
So there you go. I got a little heated. I'm sorry, but I wanted to convey two things. Number one, Longstreet's attack was supposed to be one in depth. It was either going to be Hood and McLaws behind each other or Hood and McLaws like this with double brigades behind each other. Longstreet's attack was supposed to be like Jackson's at Chancellorsville. It was going to sweep up the line all together, an irresistible force that just crushes it. Anderson's 5 brigades were never put in depth because they were simply going to be to tack on and facilitate the success, which unfortunately never happened. So that's my defense of Dick Anderson and AP Hill as far as July 2nd go. And I just think they looked at it. I don't have an account of this, but I think they just looked at it and said, okay, enough's enough. Longstreet hasn't proceeded forward. We're not going to deploy Posey forward. We're not going to deploy Mahone. And the sun is setting. And we're not going to deploy Pender because, well, first of all, Pender had been wounded late in the day. And James Lane is taking command of Pender's division. And there's all these issues about who's in command, who the senior brigadier is. And by that time, it's over. So that's it. Let's talk. I'll shut up for a minute and you guys can let me know where I went wrong or where you think I'm right or whatever.
No, I agree with all of it. I mean, like, it's pretty straightforward once you really look at it. Anderson and Hill had specific order. Hill had orders, and he fulfilled those orders accordingly by sending Anderson's division once Barksdale was in a position, being the only force that made it that far up. And from there, there was nowhere left to go. Like we said, you got to think about the time of the day as well, too. By the time, Perry is already being repulsed, or by the time Wilcox is already being driven back, it's already past 6 p.m. at that point. The sun is setting, and there's still no force for you to attach to and cooperate to. So I don't understand how, really looking at it, anybody could judge Hill and Anderson for that day's action. I mean,
I think importantly too, the show of good faith there with Anderson deploying when Barksdale did make his breakthrough. If there was no movement on Anderson's part when Barksdale dislodged the Third Corps from the Peach Orchard there, then I think there's an argument to be made that those guys were just trying to avoid making any sort of movement. But the fact is that as soon as as soon as there was that break there, Anderson started moving. It just happened that it wasn't quite. I mean, even Barksdale, when he pushes, he's pushing more east than north. And so it didn't work in the way that there was going to be this sweeping wheel by brigade that ended up being a continuous frontal assault moving northward along the line. But I think that's a defense of Anderson there. That attack, if that movement wasn't made when the Mississippi Brigade made that charge, then I don't think, and I think you could criticize Anderson a lot more.
You can't underestimate what Sickles' movement to the Peach Orchard meant for everything that happened on July 2nd. It's completely changes the game.
Yeah, whether he executed that that movement properly is a whole other debate. But
Right.
he did, whether he intended to or whatever his actual reasoning
Yeah.
behind it was, the fact of the matter is that it totally blew the minds of everything that Longstreet, McLaws, Lee, Kershaw, everyone thought that was what was going to be right in front of them was not what was in front of them. I love looking at the conversation when after the counter march on Black Horse Tavern Road, and they get started moving in the right direction again, and they're on the road. Longstreet rides up to McLaws and asks him what he plans on doing when they get deployed over the ridge, and he says, "Well, General, that will be determined when I can see what's in my front." And Longstreet assures him that there's nothing to your front, and you'll be completely on the left flank of the enemy. And McLaws says, "Well, then, okay, I guess I'll be deploying, by left wheel by brigade and move in, and we'll start sweeping their flank." And they get up there, and it's like, "Oh, wait a minute, what'd you say was going to be in my front, Pete?"
I'm going to keep marching in columns of companies.
Yep.
And when they get to the flank, I'm going to just wheel them all left, and I'm going to go in.
Yeah. Well, if
And
you
Hood's
tell me
going to follow.
then I guess that's what I'll be doing.
That tells you exactly what they were expecting versus what happened. And I think, again, like you said, I don't judge whether that's another program for another day, whether Sickles obeyed orders, whether he disobeyed, whether he intended it to happen. But there just can be no doubt that Sickles moving out forced Longstreet to deploy at a 90-degree angle from where he was supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And then Longstreet, for some reason, which I still don't understand, he starts to send his units in echelon instead of everybody at once. Now, I think he did that, in my opinion. I think he did that because he wasn't quite sure where the federal flank was. And so he's going to send
out with brigades until he actually figures it out and then deploy a whole force.
Right. And he never found, he never partially enveloped the left flank, which was the first thing he needed to do first. And then it was all going to fall into line. But because of Sickles' movement, he never found the federal left.
Yeah. Lee intended on July 2nd for the federal left to be hit with a enormous 2-division wide front sweeping up their entire flank. And at the end of the day, the only force that hit the true Union left flank was 2 regiments.
Yeah.
That's it. It dwindled down from 2 divisions to 2 regiments.
You're right.
No, I think too, one of the things with if Longstreet didn't know where the federal left was, and don't take this too much as defending Longstreet here, but he doesn't want to wheel all the way, because that would then expose his entire core flank to the enemy. Say, for example, if he wheeled too far north, then he's got the entire 3rd and 5th Corps right up against his
once you do that,
right
then
flank.
Wheel to the left, and then as soon as you start feeling pressure, you break it off a couple brigades at a time. That's when you start deploying brigades to defend your attack.
Yes.
Your movement.
Yes.
You don't just
look, guys.
Deployment to face this new threat. No, keep moving with the plan. Keep moving forward and break off brigades as you need.
As you need them. Look, guys. Lee was no dummy. Look, guys, Lee was no dummy. Look where the right flank of Hood's division is going to end up. What road?
That's the Tawnytown Road.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of the main arteries of federal supply and retreat. Okay. There's no accident as to why he's doing this plan. And it was well thought out. It was well reconnoitered. But however, it took Longstreet so long to get down to the south end of the field that things had changed by then. Exactly. And so, but even if Sickles' line was down on Little Round Top, all Longstreet had to do was just go a little bit farther to the south. Yep. And deploy at a right angle and do it that way. So again, this is not a Longstreet episode, but these are the things that affected Hill's deployment and Anderson's deployment. And like I said, you use that ice scenario, that ice thing, and you look, here's, I mean, basically you see all these units, going in different directions on the south end of the battlefield.
Yep.
So I don't have one of Longstreet's corps, but it's I don't know, it's something where I don't think we as historians in general have really looked at, well, why didn't Anderson fully deploy? I mean, there's got to be a reason, right? I mean, Anderson didn't just wake up and say, well, I'm only going to be half of a general today and only deploy half of my division. I mean, all these guys want to win, but they also don't want to go and kill a bunch of men for no reason.
Like we said, it's not a Longstreet episode, but it's kind of a Longstreet episode because everything's hinging on Longstreet's attack. Everything stems from the right. And the moment he deploys his brigades in echelon, instead of, wheeling to the left and deploying as an entire core front, moving up, that changes the game for everyone. Everyone involved is now changing their entire plan of attack because Longstreet changed his plan of attack.
Right.
Has so
okay. No, go ahead. It was so what?
I was just saying, it just has so much to do with everything he's planning and the way his deployment plays out.
Yep.
It affects the entire rest of the Confederate attacks that day. And if you really look at it, the next day.
And the neat thing about Lee's plan was, as the Federal line began to crack, more and more of Longstreet's men were going to be getting in the rear of the Federal Army.
Exactly.
And more of Anderson's people were basically going to be moving into the front and almost surrounding them.
Yep. And then if it continued moving forward, then you have Ewell over there, all the way northeast, that's going to come in on their. They'd be completely encircled if everything had gone to plan. That was the whole thing, was to push them all the way up and sandwich them in between Ewell's corps and then punch them in the face with Hill's.
Yep. And imagine if they had gotten them running and this attack had worked, and then you throw in Rhodes and Pender.
Right. You just have another whole wave coming in, wave after this succession of this massive line just moving, clearing the way north.
It really was, I think, a very good, sound tactical plan. And I don't give Hill or Anderson any, if anything, they probably shouldn't have committed Wright, because he wasn't going to be able to do it all on his own.
At that point, yeah, he's ineffectual. At that point, you already have, by the time Wright goes in, if I'm not mistaken, the Florida Brigade and Wilcox's Alabamians have already been taking fire and are slowing down and are basically at the point where they're going to turn around. And then Wright goes in and just met with the exact same thing. And that's what causes them to be like, okay, well, this isn't working.
And anybody who knows, or anybody who would take issue with my argument here in this presentation, I would ask them one question. If Anderson was supposed to be one of the main assaults here, where was his support? There were no supports for Anderson. Anderson was the cherry on top. Exactly. That's why he deployed in such a thin line. They didn't need him to be in a thick line.
Exactly. It all stems from the original plan. I think what people fail to do is they fail to remember the original plan. They only look at what happened and think that it was supposed to be this, massive frontal assault, just a straight eastern push against the Union line. And that's not what it was supposed to be. And everything happened because they were it's Longstreet's interpretation of what was supposed to happen. His reaction to trying to fulfill those orders by trying to find the Federal left, by deploying each brigade in echelon, and everything falls apart because of that.
So why do you think he put him in an echelon? I think it was to try to find where the flank was, but
I think really there's only two options. One is your theory that he's trying to feel out and find the flank to figure out a way to deploy against it in force, or B, it's a panic move because he's just at this point, like, he knows he's so far behind. He's just trying to get something going in hopes that he can at this point still carry out Lee's orders. That's why he's so, against listening to Hood about going a little bit farther south at that point, which honestly is a problem of it in of itself. But yeah, I think it's one of those two things. It's either a panic move or he's trying to just figure out where the hell he can start his attack from.
Um, I have some quotes here. I got to find them in my notes, and I'm doing this on my computer here, but um, there are some interesting quotes that are critical of that. Oh, here we go. The critical of the en echelon deployment. E. Porter Alexander wrote in his memoirs on page 403, said he spoke of the evils of progressive attacks, and by progressive he meant en echelon. There was some other, the weakest part of Sickles' line was the angle at the peach orchard, and it was the nearest, and time was of great importance, for it was late in the afternoon. I think the best and strongest assault would have been for both divisions in a decidedly shorter line to have a simultaneously assault on the peach orchard. But as it was, Hood moved first alone and had a long and desperate fight upon Sickles' left flank before McLaws was launched upon the peach orchard. Made in the peculiar way that it was, all of Hood's men and a part of McLaws had to bring their front parallel to that of the enemy. In reading the reports by the subordinate officers, one cannot but be struck by the manner in which during this fighting the continuity of the lines was broken and regiments and brigades were separated and stretched out and often their flanks exposed. Generally, every brigade fought on its own hook. That's from E. Porter Alexander. So
right there.
There it is. There it is. I mean,
funny, out of all the after action reports and memoirs, what nobody I don't think sums it up that well. That's exactly what happened and why it fell apart.
Yep. I've had that quote. I rely on that when people try to defend Longstreet's deployment on that day. Historians, I'm going to tell you guys, tour guides, historians, they go, "Oh, that was Longstreet's in echelon attack. It was brilliant." He's trying to catch the Union guessing against itself, and then he can just slam. It was not brilliant. It was the stupidest thing he could have done.
Well, what part of it would make it a brilliant attack? At what point? It's not coordinated. It's not at all what it was supposed to be. It's not following orders. It's borderline insubordination.
I've just heard tour guides say, "Oh, the way Longstreet deployed in the echelon assault, they defend it." And now I think Longstreet in his head, same thing that you said. He panicked. He tried to find the Union flank, but then he goes, "Oh, well, Anderson's deploying in echelon. Maybe I should too." I don't know.
Well, he wouldn't have seen how much he would have seen. He would have been deploying in echelon first, right?
Right, but he knew that Anderson was supposed to deploy in echelon as well.
And so he's like, "Oh, maybe if I just start that off, it'll work out down the line."
I don't know. I just, to me, it's foolish. And E. Porter Alexander, he nails it. He nails it with that.
It's a very good summary of what happened right there.
I've always felt that these two gentlemen need to be a bit, they need to have their reputations enhanced on this issue, on this limited issue. Listen, they both have made mistakes. Hill made a mistake on July 1st. Obviously, he didn't reconnoiter. He was not on the field when Heath made the assault, and he should have been there. He probably was way too aggressive. He started a general action and shouldn't have. But on July 2nd, again, he's in the center of the Union line. What more do you want Hill to do? He's
holding the line.
He's holding the line. So I don't know. I just think these two gentlemen deserve a bit of a reprieve. I don't think historians or people in general understand the complexities of the differences between a sweeping flank assault and an echelon assault, and how those two things are very different.
I think it really helps understanding the Gettysburg campaign as a whole if you study the Chancellorsville campaign.
That's 100%.
Really puts you in the mindset of Lee and what he was intending to do, because it's, I mean, Chancellorsville is known as Lee's masterpiece. I mean, that's, you know, his greatest victory. And when you look at what he was trying to do in Gettysburg, none of his supporting generals understood or realized what he was going for, and just failed to make it happen.
Anything you need to know about Gettysburg, you learned at Chancellorsville. I'm telling you, they are so similar. There you go. But it's not a gang signal. That's a reference to the Orange Turnpike and the Orange Plank Road. They go like this, and then they go like this, and then they go like this. And okay, so that's something we're gonna learn when we go to Chancellorsville next year.
That's gonna be a good one.
All right, so I don't know, Benny, you've been quiet. Talk to us.
I don't have a lot of disagreements. I think sometimes, believe it or not, I am a man of few words. But I think I can, you know, it sums it up in orientation of the attack. It was supposed to be a northward attack with 2 divisions with Longstreet, and it turned into an eastward attack. And that changed the complete dynamic of what the support was supposed to do. I mean, if you're going to attack northward, it makes sense to tack on brigades and echelon moving as like in the direction of the attack. But in terms of the parallel line, what ended up happening is all of these brigades were all of the Longstreet's brigades were attacking eastward. There's no reason to. But I also don't think that Anderson and Hill were acting in bad faith in any way. They weren't protesting their orders. I think they were just they were assuming that the conditions weren't met for their orders to be executed.
Yep.
I feel like a lot of people would have just like a really surface level understanding of Gettysburg. And like you were saying, there's a lot of complexities as to why everything happened the way it happened. Like, I feel like people look at Little Round Top and look at that as okay, this is the culmination of the battle. This is the left flank of the Union line. And whereas it was the left flank of the Union line, you gotta, like, they didn't know it was the left flank of the Union line.
I think Little Round Top I don't think it was the left flank. I think Little Round Top was an outpost of the Federal line. It was like a large picket post. Like, they just shoved men up there because they didn't want the Confederates to get up there.
Right, but either way, at the end of the day, that became, you know, this frontal, like this assault on this focal point, instead of just going in front of it and going around it and sweeping up the field like the attack was supposed to. It kind of becomes like the focus of it, whereas that's not what it was intended to be.
Keep talking. I got to find a book.
So I think that Gettysburg and a lot of this in particular, but it all kind of, it falls victim of like memory bias. And when we look at something like Gettysburg, we look at what happened. And then based on what happened, we try to draw conclusions about why it happened that way. But I think that what is lost in a lot of this is what was supposed to happen. And so when you look at the Battle of Gettysburg, what happened was there was this kind of shitstorm on the southern end of the Union line on Little Round Top, Devil's Den, and the wheat field. And because that was such a significant amount of fighting, we say, oh, this was big, this was important. But when you look at what was supposed to happen, none of it included any of those sites as major focal points of the assault. And so when you extrapolate too far from the what actually happened, then you get these conjectures of things like Anderson didn't move, didn't do anything, and Hill had no idea what was going on, when in reality it's the other way. You know, this was supposed to happen a certain way, it didn't, therefore Hill didn't move.
Right.
This book here, I would encourage anyone who is interested in the Civil War or Gettysburg in particular. This book is life altering
Come here.
for students of the battle. It's called Lee's Real Plan at Gettysburg. It's written by Troy Harmon, who is a NPS National Park Service guide. Not guide, he's an employee
Ranger.
there.
He's an interpreter, ranger.
He's not a
And
licensed battlefield tour guide.
no, he works right for the NPS.
Okay.
Troy wrote this book, and it is it puts to rest the notion that Lee wanted to take Little Round Top and that Round Top was everything. His thesis is that all of the Confederate combinations for those 3 days was to try to take Cemetery Hill, and that Little Round Top was a sideshow. It became this main thing because, as Ben pointed out, the memory of the war, obviously the battle happened there. Chamberlain's memoirs and all of his writings made it big. Michael Shara wrote a great book called The Killer Angels. It was turned into a movie called Gettysburg. But in reality, if you would have told anyone in 1863 that Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain would have been the hero of Gettysburg, everyone in the Union Army would have laughed at you, or they would have been like, who's Josh Chamberlain? And so this book, I'm telling you, it's everything that a lot of us have been talking about over the years around the campfire, but it puts it all into a really good argument. And it is, before you read any other major history, this is like a prerequisite to read for Gettysburg. I'm telling you, it's a great book, because everybody has said, oh, what the hell was Lee thinking those 3 days? Lee had a very specific tactical plan that he wanted executed, that he had seen executed before, and it didn't happen. Frontal assaults, guys. Lee'd been ordering frontal assaults for the entire war.
Right. He didn't just go mad and all of a sudden think like, we can do it. I have faith in my boys. Like, no. Yeah.
Now, I do think to some extent on July 3rd, he was like, Longstreet's giving me crap. Ewell's can't act with decision. I'm going to just do a frontal assault. I'm going to try to plan it, and I'm going to put it in my boys' hands. But he had seen these things work before. It wasn't like he just was, crazy or had diarrhea, or, I mean, people have said that, like, oh, he wasn't feeling good, so he ordered Pickett's charge. Well, that makes no sense.
I'm sick, so I'm just going to completely forget everything I've ever known. And yeah.
And he'd seen these sorts of attacks succeed before. He'd seen some fail, but by and large, his men would take a position if he asked them to.
Yeah, look at Chancellorsville. You got to look at Chancellorsville.
You really do. You really do. Chancellorsville is it's very similar to Gettysburg in that it's a meeting engagement, an attempted flank attack on the second day, and the third day he's going to do an all-out frontal assault.
If Gettysburg had worked out according to plan.
Yeah, and what's sad about it, and I've always said this, and I'll go into a Longstreet thing here, but what's sad is he wanted the same accolades that Jackson got at Chancellorsville. He wanted that for Longstreet. He gave the most important critical assignments to Longstreet on July 2nd and 3rd because he trusted him and he was a senior commander. He gave him the same sort of trust and encouragement that he wanted to see that Jackson got. And I just don't think Longstreet served him well.
Right from the get-go, you have Longstreet just almost in full insubordination against him. Just every angle he's.
My, how you have come around, friend.
When we talk about all these different things that happen, I mean, how long it took him to get from Marsh Creek to the battlefield on the first day. I mean, that part of me is ridiculous in of itself. He's got so much going on that every turn is just going against like what Lee would have done.
Yeah. He's not being a real team player.
Right. And when you look at Jackson, it's everything he does is what Lee would have done, sometimes even before Lee realizes it.
But that's a different episode.
Yeah,
and I'm not a big Jackson, like some people just drool over Jackson.
It's an independent command guy, but I think that under Lee's guide and Lee's leadership, they were a great team.
They were. Yeah.
I mean, his
I'll
Valley
tell you
campaign
what,
is crazy. I don't think I'm not one of those guys that praises his Valley campaign, but
I'll tell you, Jackson, you should read. I should get it out sometime, and we'll go through it. There's a when Lee was reorganizing the artillery in the Army of Northern Virginia in the spring of '63. Jackson just wrote him this scathing letter
oh man,
about. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, we have this vision of Lee and Stonewall being best buds, and they're like each other's soulmates, but I'll tell you what, it was written in February, I think, of '63 during the reorganization of the artillery, and Jackson was pissed about something, and I mean, it was borderline offensive and insubordinate. Like, it wouldn't be something I would have written to R.E. Lee. I'll tell you that.
worse than Longstreet writing to Lee asking for Hood's command.
Oh, you
Or-
mean Bragg?
yeah,
Right, right, right. Oh my Lord.
that's a good one.
So anyway, I had to get that off my chest. Thank you for indulging me.
I think
I
you
won't
made a
do it.
good defense, and I think anybody out there would be hard pressed to argue against it. I mean, given all the facts and the orders in black and white of what was supposed to happen, when you get an understanding of that, it's really hard to press Anderson for not having committed more brigades, for Hill for not being there supposedly, and it's all
Right.
right there in black and white. You just got to dig deep into it.
Someday, Dylan, do you think you could do a Ambrose Wright episode? Because I know you feel pretty strongly about him.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is, I just don't. I don't believe that letter that he penned to his wife after the Battle of Gettysburg. There's a couple of people who say he wasn't even on the field for Pickett's charge. Oh, I just blew up my pen.
Yeah, we need to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get into that. I'm down. I got to finish. I'm still working on my Maryland presentation. That's going to be next. But
Yeah,
once we can finish that, I'd love to get into that because I have some things to say about old Mr. Wright.
that'd be good. Ben, what else you got hopping for a potential
For
program?
potential, well, we've got we've done Eastern Theater clothing. I think some more pop it on about equipment could be in the works.
Like that.
Next year's kind of 1864 cycle, so that's kind of my wheelhouse, if you will. I feel like we could probably do a series or so of a few episodes.
Absolutely. And I actually
Like
got
an Overland campaign series, so do Wilderness, Spotsylvania, North Anna, Cold Harbor, Petersburg.
Someone had requested that on our
Oh, really? Okay, I must
yeah,
have.
someone said we need to do a wilderness stuff. And you know what we could do? Let's do a 61st Georgia
Well, yeah,
wilderness.
we could do a Gordon's Brigade at Wilderness.
Yeah.
That's. I mean, they were involved there. That would definitely be something to look at, as well as I guess we kind of did Atlanta campaign in episode 1, but
Well, we did up to Atlanta. I think I'd like to do an Atlanta, the battles for Atlanta.
battles for Atlanta. Yeah.
I also want to do Stones River.
Okay. Yeah. I think that. I mean, there's plenty of stuff that we could do.
Yeah.
I was thinking an episode just kind of more accounts and stuff on the mundane of soldiers' life, what they were doing in winter camp, on campaign, just their like what actual life was other than the actual engagements would be something, what they wrote home, what they did for entertainment, talk about some of the stuff in the culture in the armies during the time. That would be something interesting. So
I also would like to see some of your requisition stuff.
oh yeah, the quartermaster, or like the paperwork aspect of all that.
Yep. When do you think? So next episode, do you think we do Maryland, Dylan?
Yeah, definitely. I just got a couple of stuff I'm finishing up on on those slides, but really, really interesting. I found out a lot more than I ever thought I'd know about Maryland infantry, and some interesting stuff for sure. I got a couple of cool firsthand accounts, some cool stuff from the Southern Historical Society papers, all kinds of.
There's
Really
not
cool.
that many regiments, just 1 or 2, right? In the Army of Northern Virginia.
It is one infantry regiment that becomes an infantry battalion that grows in size, and then there is 2 cavalry regiments, and then there is four batteries of artillery.
Okay. Okay.
Is that Stewart's brigade in Early's Corps or
And Ewell's
Ewell's Corps? Yeah, that one.
Stewart. So Stewart commands a couple brigades. At one point, Stewart's commanding, yes, a brigade that has the Marylanders in it. When we get to the Gettysburg campaign, yes, it's Stewart's brigade and Johnson's division of Ewell's Corps.
But there's only one regiment of infantry, right?
In that brigade, yeah, it's the 1st Maryland Battalion. They're actually attached to the brigade. They're kind of an independent command.
Right. Stewart was a Marylander, but I think he had some North Carolina troops in that brigade as well, didn't he? And some Virginia.
So yeah, so he took over that brigade from Raleigh Colston, and it was a brigade of Virginians and North Carolinians that did not get along at all. There was a lot of state rivalries that are going on. Lee was disappointed in Colston's performance at Chancellorsville, relieved him of command, and then that's when Stewart got placed in command of that brigade, and he brought with him the first Maryland Battalion at that time. And Lee was hoping that he'd be able to bring this sort of, some sense of unity to this unruly brigade, and then they get put into the fighting at Culp's Hill and see some of the gnarliest fighting at Gettysburg and lose over 700 guys.
All right, we're ahead of ourselves here. There's your preview for the next episode.
Actually, got a little taste of it. It's really interesting.
We also have been talking about doing a top 20 or a top 25. So we're gonna decide on 25 generals, Union and Confederate equal numbers, and we may do like a top 25. We each do our top 25 for a particular month or season of the year, and we'll see where those kind of
break it down into like football quarters, like the first quarter of the war, second quarter of the war.
Oh yeah, we can do that too. Yeah, we can do it any number of ways. So we have some ideas. We would like our listeners to give us ideas, because ultimately we want people to enjoy this and get something out of it. I'm enjoying the hell out of it, but I love this.
This is kind of what our conversations are like on Facebook and phone calls and anyway. So
I mean, we would be having this conversation anyways.
Would still love some Yingling on my doorstep one day.
Yep, still taking sponsorship.
Yeah, still taking sponsorships.
What are you guys reading right now?
Still working on Grant's memoirs. I just smashed through the Maryland Boy in Lee's Army, which is George Wilson Booth's memoirs of the war.
Okay.
And then once I just finished that, so I'm still working on Grant's memoirs in the meantime as well.
Okay, Benny.
Currently, book-wise, I actually am in between Civil War books. Just wrapped up North Anna campaign. I briefly started reading a John Keegan history on World War I. So I de-Civil Warred there, but I'm on the internet a lot. I read a lot of articles about specific stuff. So, looking at right now, I'm looking at the winter of 63, 64 for both armies and the transition into the next year.
I'm reading Ed Bears's Vicksburg trilogy on volume 1. And in my spare time, when I'm just flipping, I bought Red Clay to Richmond, History of the 35th Georgia from Edward Thomas's brigade. Again, I'm trying to just acquire unit histories and first-person accounts from all the units in Hill's Corps, or as many as I can get. So that's what I'm doing. But good. Well,
stuff, guys.
I think Dick Anderson and AP Hill will sleep well tonight. I know I will.
Their names have been redeemed, I believe.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and I guess we'll call it there.
Yep, we'll see you all next time.
All right.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in.